Alrighty, so this is quite a detailed um, presentation. There's a lot of slides to get through, as you can see. So it's like quite a big one, and it's really important that we get this right because this is kind of dictating our programming moving forward. Progressive overload is the key thing that we need to have. We've talked about all the things that need to factor in to make it work, which is having full range of motion, having a standardized tempo of some description to an extent. It doesn't have to be super anal retentive. But if we don't progress, we're not going to get any better. And people are actually going to go backwards. So progressive overload is our number one thing. So we're going to go through a bunch of different models. Now, the programs that we give you have these built into it, but it is very important that you understand it because then you can apply it yourself. So the first model is single progression models. So in these, you're going to improve one specific variable per microcycle, which is typically a training week, and really simple yet effective for steady improvements. So I have a couple of different ways to do it. First one is load progression. Really intuitive, put more weight on. There's some nuances to doing it and ways that you can move it around. So I might just move this so I don't see my head in the shot all the time. No, can't do that. Cool. So the first one's an arbitrary load progression. And you can see this in powerlifting programs a lot of the time, but predetermined weight increases. It's simple to implement, provides clear expectation for clients, ideal for beginners or those seeking a ton of structure. Now, it may not match an individual's progression rate. So some people, it's too slow. For some people, it's too fast. For some people, it's too consistent. They have peaks and troughs in how they progress. So I really don't use arbitrary load progressions. If I'm working with a beginner, I'm like, cool, first week we go squat the 6. Next week we might do the 7. And then I'll move to a more intuitive method over a period of time. But I might start with this, but I certainly don't stick with it. Because if everyone just used arbitrary load progressions forever, we all squatting 1,000 kilos. Now, autoregulatory progressive resistance exercise, or APRE, is adjusting loads based on performance, particularly by taking the last set to failure. So your subsequent loads are determined by the number of reps achieved. It can be highly individualized, incorporate daily performance fluctuations, but it relies on one set, which doesn't really give you a whole bunch of stuff to work with there. So I generally tend to avoid this as well in most scenarios. And you've got an RPE progression, which is base loads based on perceived difficulty. That's a really good method, which you can also use rep ranges for, that adapts for daily performance, accounts for fatigue, recovery, and readiness. So it's really good for advanced lifters. The problem is it requires pretty good self-assessment, and beginners misjudge it all the time. Even advanced lifters misjudge it all the time. So I don't use it too much. The main one I use is, can you lift more? Yes. And then we keep going from there. Now, with our set progression is increasing number of sets, 3 to 5 over a couple of weeks. Useful for hypertrophy, useful work capacity. The overload of volume can really extend session durations, making it impractical, and can overwhelm your recovery capacity in some case. So use it on someone who's like a level 3 client who's super keen to do stuff. Now, from there you go rep progression, which is adding reps to sets without increasing load. It's good for joint health, especially for beginners, because you're not adding more load all the time. It sets manageable targets and can really foster some confidence, but it can shift the trainee out of their intended rep range. So if you do this for forever, their reps might go from 5 and move up to 8, then 10 to 12. It takes them out of the goal that they're trying to achieve. Okay, so what I would generally do is give a load and a rep range. So let's just say if you've got a rep range of 8 to 12 at 100 kilos, if what happens, you get to the point where you can do 12 reps at 100 for 3 sets, then we're going to increase the weight to the next increment, which could be 102.5 or 105. And then density progression is increasing the amount of work done in a fixed time. So you can reduce rest periods or perform more reps in a given time frame, which is really good for building work capacity and endurance, but it can lead to compromised form and recovery during heavy lifts because people want to hit the numbers based at all cost. And the program that really does this well is escalating density training, which we have a template to use within the course. Surveyor or microcycle, now we have macrocycle progression methods, which are longer term ones. And the first one would be range of motion. Okay, so we can increase the range of motion from exercises or the complexity. So we move from a split squat to a rear foot elevated split squat. A split squat. That's going to have greater range of motion, which is going to give another demand to the client. So these are good because they enhance mobility and flexibility while strengthening your range of motion and can also prevent boredom. Now, the drawback is reduced initial loading and hypertrophic adaptations because you got to learn something new. Okay, so great for many clients, and once they get to a certain point, they don't need to progress any further in terms of range of motion in the exercise. Now, exercise selection is progression by changing the exercise to make it more complex and more capable of heavier loads, such as a goblet squat to a back squat. Increases loading capacity, keeps the programs engaging. Now, it does require time to adapt to new movements, which can maybe reduce the initial training intensity. Sometimes it can be too big an overload. So this one I still use quite often with people because we want to move them to the exercises that have the most bang for their buck. Now, tempo progression is modifying the speed of movements to alter the stimulus, so slowing the eccentric, added pauses. We've talked about this in the previous module. It may affect the load limited. I will do this based mainly on strength. Okay, so if someone is struggling with a certain part of lift, I may in the next phase focus the tempo to really strengthen that up. Now, they're all the single progression models. Now, here's a way that we can do a double progression model, which will involve basically improving two variables at once. So a traditional double progression is this. You increase reps within a predefined range and then add load once the upper limit is reached. It's clear, predictable, it's useful for clients seeking structured plans. It may not suit some individuals with fluctuating recovery, but because you're using a rep range, it does kind of allow for it in most situations. So I will generally use this more than any other progressive overload method, and you'll see this used in all the programs that we have. I'm a massive fan of this one because it's simple to use. It encourages people to keep on getting better every single time and gives them very clear guidelines on what to do. Now, with dynamic auto-regulated double progression, it's guided by maintaining consistent reps in reserve for all sets. So you adjust it based on daily performance. So if you normally squat 100 for 10, if you're having a bad day, you might do 90 for 10. If you're having a good day, you might do 110 for 10. The problem with that is it relies on accurate reps in reserve, which a lot of people struggle with. So again, I really like traditional double progression. We want to give people something simple to work with that they can move towards better goals. Now we've got a couple of triple progression models that we can look at, which is another more complex way of progressing, but can be very, very useful. And this is the model. You add reps until the upper rep range is reached. Let's just say they start with 3 sets of 8 to 12. Once they've hit the upper rep range, 3 sets of 8, 12, and the goal is to get the 5 sets of 12. Okay, so once they've hit the upper rep range, 12, 12, 12, the next week they have a set. It could be 12, 12, 12, 9. And then when they get to 12, 12, 12, 12, you add one more set. Once they hit the top part of that, then you increase load and restart the progression. So this one here it really is fine-tuned progression because people really have to master the lift and the load. It really does encourage technical mastery of the material because they have to practice so much and can be really good for assistance exercises and hypertrophy goals. Now, it can be impractical compound lifts due to slower strength adaptations in people when they're really, really strong. And it can be a lot of volume. I like this model, but for a lot of people, it's a really hard one to kind of stick to. Again, the standard double progression is the best one, in my opinion, for most things. Now, how do we incorporate RPE and RIR into it? I generally tend not to for the vast majority of people. I want them to try and get better all the time. So with RPE, I will let people use this reactively rather than actually planning for it. So what I mean by that, I want people to go into the gym and they're ready to go after it. Okay, they're ready to try and attack that performance for that workout. If they're having a worse day, that's okay. We just do what we can on that particular day and then we move forward. If a lot of people get really stressed out about identifying their RPE or their reps in reserve, and they tend to overcomplicate the process, and we don't need more overcomplication of things that happen in the gym. We need a whole bunch of effort more so as our primary thing. So if someone's having a bad day or they're a little bit tired, cool. Let's let them take it a little bit easier. But the rest of the time we get right back on track. A lot of the time, this RPE and reps in reserve for most people will be auto-regulated by the stresses that they go under and the automatic deloads that they're going to have just because they simply won't have it that day. And that's totally okay for that to happen. The goal is for that to happen less and less over a longer period of time. Now, you can also use this with alternating between accumulation and intensification with progressing people through this, which is a very hard thing to do. So you might move someone through a progression model where they're doing volume and then one where they're doing load, back and forth and seeking through that. It requires a lot of planning and doesn't really help a lot of clients with simplicity. So what takeaway should you have from this? Your best model, bar none, is to use the traditional double progression model as your main way of progressing clients throughout the programs. In terms of your exercise selection, what you probably look at is moving through a range of motion or an exercise selection progression with all clients across all programs, implementing tempo progression based on weak points. And if you need to look at any of these other ones here, they fall under that double progression method anyway. So if you understand that and apply those concepts, programming becomes a very simple thing to do to make effective programs for your clients to get awesome results.